Welcome, everybody, to the Collateral Damage Podcast. So, Maureen, today we have a guest, Justin Cambria, who's a friend of mine, a colleague. I've known him for quite a while. And along with being a person in recovery, he's been in this industry, around. He's been in this industry for quite a while. Worked at O'Connor Professional Group, currently works at Turnbridge. And, just really likes working with the family. He does some support groups with Diana Clark.
Does he really?
Up in Massachusetts as well. I'm kind of interested to hear his take as just, a person in recovery, trying to get well in the community and, how to maintain that long-term recovery, which I know is something everybody deals with. I deal with it. Your daughter deals with it. I think everybody that's trying to get well is figuring out that initial blast of I'm trying to get well. I need to go to meetings. I need to go to this program. And then, okay, now what? I'm back to zero. I got to get a job. I've got to live a normal life. Like, what does that look like in recovery?
Right. Yeah. Not an easy thing. I mean, no. I think that even parents, they're in their own recovery. And I think that they need to continue to go to meetings and connect with people because you start forgetting you start slipping back into those old behaviors.
That's easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is good. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Same. All right. Well, without further ado, here's Justin Cambria. So thank you for joining us, Justin.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Always good to have some conversation with somebody that's in the field and has been for quite a while. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, sure. Anytime. I never miss a recovery podcast.
Well, that's good. So actually today's podcast is about recovery. I know Maureen and I were chatting earlier about this article that we saw. I believe this was the Cape Cod Times, written by Jeannie Yaroch, Yaroch. I don't want to say I pronounced it wrong. At least I spelled it out for her. But, it was definitely an article about recovery being contagious, which I just thought was William White put that phrase in there, and I thought that was just a really good way to look at it. He said, addiction is contagious as well, but it is transacted. Where has he got this here? He said, recovery is contagious, but while addiction takes hold through passivity and neglect, recovery spreads through conscious intention, which I thought was really intense. That there's this idea that the addiction is spread through all of these other behaviors and lifestyle issues, and that recovery requires something else, but it's also contagious. And I think that's a really good topic for us to pick up on today.
Yeah, is that Will White from Summit Achievement, or a different William White?
It's a different William White.
Okay.
It's the William White as far as I know. I didn't know there was another one, so the only one I'm aware of.
There's probably a lot of them out there, but he's the real deal, William White.
Will White at Summit Achievement is a legend in the field. He's like the godfather of wilderness therapy.
This could be the same gentleman. Yeah. He's a renowned recovery scholar, an author, an advocate. He definitely has a lot of papers written, and I think he's got he helped with the Addictionary. And put a lot of input into the recovery coaching out here in Massachusetts as well. So.
Oh, great.
Yep. So yeah, what's that?
I like that whole idea of recovery is contagious. I mean, and I think that could mean a lot of things. But I know that I always talk about the fact that we keep talking about the death toll. As if we can scare people to recovery. And I think that it really needs to be just the opposite. We need to be talking about recovery because people recover. And offering that ability to join together and do positive things and think in a positive way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, the beyond recovery. It's beyond the initial stages of abstinence. Getting out of a detox or getting off of whatever it is that you're doing. The idea of recovery being contagious. It's almost like it's inviting. If other people are doing it around you and it becomes normal, you normalize this new way of life. It's contagious. You want it,
I can speak to that in my experience. I was sharing my story last night with some young gentlemen who are earlier in their journey than I, and reflecting on my early days. Like, I saw therapists. They helped me. They helped me get ready. Coming to a 12-step fellowship and getting around other young people who were positive on recovery and sobriety, doing fun things, and taking care of their life. I mean, that was the single biggest inspiration for me. I've worked the 12 steps backwards and forwards and had a great experience with it. But in my lived experience, it's that recovery community and getting around people and the contagiousness of that really was like, okay, this is something I must have.
Well, I remember the first time I decided that I wanted to get well. It was because I saw a friend of mine who was doing well, somebody that I had used with in the past, and even sold and done drugs with for years. And I saw him sober. I saw him happy. I saw him. He had a real smile on his face. He was living a different kind of life, and I wanted that. And I was like, I like that, And it drove me. It inspired me to at least start the fight,
Yeah. I mean, that's why peer support is so important, and we need more and more avenues for people to access peer support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can't get well in a vacuum. It's hard to get well, like if you go to treatment and then you come back from treatment and you just pop yourself into your family's house or, where nobody else is in recovery. It feels abnormal. It doesn't feel like what everyone else is doing. Everybody else is just not doing drugs and being normal, and there you are struggling with all these feelings, trying to get well, trying to recover, and you need that peer support. You need other people to help build up that sense of recovery inside of you.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to see more of that, though. I know that I was involved last year in Recovery Fest. It was a day-long festival in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, where we had music all day. We had Macklemore there and Fits and the Tantrums, and it was a sober event. So I think we're starting to see more of the event style, and you had the Phoenix, the gyms that are sober, working. I guess anybody that's had, at least 48 hours of sobriety can go for free. We have another one down in on the Cape called Well Strong, I believe. And, that's another gym where anybody can go free of charge. So I think we're seeing more of that.
Yeah, I think it's starting to grow. I think those types of things need to grow in prevalence outside of AA and NA for the kind of the next generation. That those being the default peer support networks, I think there'll always be a place. I've benefited from them tremendously, but I think we need some peer support outside of church basements to become as prevalent as AA and NA have been in the past 20 or 30 years to really make recovery as contagious as it could be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, another part of this article, I love to keep referring to it because it was pretty insightful. It says, because another piece of truth about recovery that needs to be told. People in recovery are strong, creative, compassionate, resourceful, and talented. They, like all of us, deserve and desire to be self-directed and of service to others. Through their recovery, they restore not only themselves, but also our community. They become wage earners, taxpayers, volunteers, voters, and neighbors. And, aside from that, it's like they're coming back into the community, and the support can't, like you just said, be in a church basement. You know what I mean? Right. It can't be 3 days a week at this community center. It's the community. These are community members. There's a percentage of people who are coming back and actually, opening businesses, working at your local restaurants and stores, and they're a part of the community. So that support, that peer support, it almost needs to transcend the recovery part of it, and just as community members supporting each other through an illness, back into their life, back into the community, the neighborhood, whatever it might be. I think those are the conversations I want to see. People talking more openly about it. Peer support, not just being other people recovering, but like everyone in my community. Hey, I was off, I got sick, I'm back. That would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely growing. I mean, I'm known around here in Milton for recovering out loud, and some of my friends kind of joke with me a lot about it, that I recover out very loud, and I'm into it. And I went and saw Eliza Dushku speak not too long ago. She's an out loud recoverer with a much larger reach than I, and I hung around like a shameless fan because I wanted to say hello to her and just thank her for the loudness of her recovery and her willingness with her visibility to step out. And that type of stuff can only help, more and more advocates who are well thought of who are visible, saying, yeah, I'm in recovery and it's cool. Being in recovery is cool.
It is. I've actually seen some sober groups. There's like some sober bars and stuff out in New York City that are picking up. I think we've talked about this in one of our previous podcasts. That there's these communities breaking out where they're going out and having fun and doing stuff that they wouldn't normally have done, and are creating little subculture, which I love.
Wouldn't this be interesting if this changed like the whole consciousness around the necessity to drink or do drugs at events? Instead of it being the norm, it was stopping the norm. Because I know my daughter's planning her wedding, and one of her big concerns is, should we have alcohol or not? It's like, well, you don't drink, and a lot of your friends don't drink. Why do we have to have alcohol at the wedding? So, and it's just such a, I'm sure people go to these events and they expect that there be alcohol there. But why is that the norm? What does alcohol have anything to do with the wedding? So, I just think that maybe everybody's got to change the way they think a little bit too, and that wouldn't be a bad thing.
Well, I saw a quote by Robin Williams this morning that said, "If you need drugs and alcohol to live life, you're doing it wrong," which I thought was, or to enjoy life, I believe is the quote.
Yeah, I would hope that at your daughter's wedding, pretty much anyone who's there could be supportive of an alcohol-free environment. I struggled with my own wedding, and we did have alcohol because my family likes to drink and they're normal drinkers, and I'm okay being around it. But I agree with kind of the default mode of, oh, it's a wedding. There must be an open bar because, Uncle Johnny expects to be able to get wasted at the wedding. I mean, it's a little silly. And not in many social contexts. I remember talking to a friend about this back in my pre-sober days of just getting together with other friends for dinners, the necessity and expectation of showing up with your bottle of wine or whatever. And it's just crazy how we're programmed that way.
Or, dating, any social activities. Hey, you want to go out? So the question is, hey, do you want to go out and do what? Do you want to go out and get a drink? Do you want to go grab something to eat and have a drink? Do you want to meet for a drink? And it just becomes, it's kind of like with with teenagers and how we talk about in high school, marijuana is a great social lubricant. It's that thing that allows them to have social interaction when they have no real social skills yet. It's like, oh, you smoke? I smoke. We all smoke. Let's get together and smoke. It's immediate connection, even though you haven't used any social tools to connect. And, I think adults, that's the adult version is alcohol. Hey, let's go grab a drink and sit down and talk. And, alcohol then becomes a social lubricant that allows people to be comfortable with each other. It's that default social setting for dating and events and stuff. Like we just had a fundraiser for Bay State, and the question always comes up: are we going to have alcohol there? Because we deal with the the community that we deal with, and it's like, well, I mean, why not? I think a lot of people expect it, so we end up doing it. It doesn't affect the event at all, but I think it's sad that we have to just assume people are going to want to drink if they show up. I don't know. I don't know how to change that. How do you change that social expectation that there will be alcohol?
I know we had Magnolia hasn't had a fundraiser in a while, but we had one and we didn't have alcohol. We decided not to have alcohol, and people were annoyed. and you know what? They'll get over it.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah, I spoke at a fundraiser for the Graken Center a couple of weeks ago, and they went back and forth and did decide to have beer and wine. And there's a little bit of a cultural expectation there, especially at fundraisers where you're asking people to open up their wallets and make a contribution. There's kind of a alcohol culture around there, which is a little ironic when you're raising funds for addiction treatment services. But I think, again, they focus a lot on community-based opiate use disorder and medication-assisted treatment. And I think the upper middle class around here that would show up to something like that and have a glass of wine probably see a distinction there.
Well, I mean, it's not an event for people struggling with SUD. It's an event to have other people raise funds to support them. And that's how we always looked at it. But, I think it would be interesting if we could change that Yeah, I did see an interesting article the other day about a woman that was really complaining about the dating thing and how hard it was for her to come back out and just interact with people without alcohol. You know, like I was saying earlier, that coming out, and how do you socialize with people without bringing alcohol into the equation? Why is it always just assumed?
Should we start the sober Tinder? Should we quit what we're doing and make $1 million with Tinder for the sober people? Though there is a filter. I mean, I happened to meet my wife on a dating site called howaboutwe.com, where you could propose a specific activity, and then people could respond to, they could obviously check your pics and whatever and read your profile, but they could accept your specific activity. And I did have a non-drinking filter on there, which surprisingly enough, didn't eliminate everyone. There were women I could browse from who had "I don't drink" checked on their profile, and not all of them were in recovery. But that just kind of made it easier for me, where that was off the table. And I accepted her proposal to go salsa dancing, but then we ended up eating ice cream. The great sober replacement for a first date beer. Ice cream.
Yeah, it does work.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've done that. I mean, that you check off the "I don't drink," and to me, "I don't drink" means one thing. To somebody else that doesn't have what I have, "I don't drink" means a totally different thing. Just maybe I don't drink alcoholically, or maybe I don't drink all the time, but doesn't mean I don't drink. And so that's a tough connection. I mean, I actually don't want. I remember a Thanksgiving early on in recovery when I came and I showed up. Now, my family likes to, have drinks, and, there's a couple of them that maybe smoke some pot or whatever. And, this was my first year sober, I believe. And I showed up and kind of, without a lot of discussion in advance, they kind of took it upon themselves to choose that this was going to be a sober Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And, as appreciative as I was for the gesture, it made for a really awkward and uncomfortable Thanksgiving for me, surprisingly, because I had to watch them all not enjoying themselves or not partaking, and it was kind of frustrating. So it was strange having people make that sacrifice for me without talking to me, and watching them not enjoy their evening. So the same could be said if I went out to have a drink with somebody and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to drink because you're in recovery." That would be weird for me.
Yeah.
See, but I don't drink when I'm out with my daughter, because I don't really care if I drink or not. And why I really don't want to have a couple of drinks, because 2 drinks, my face turns red, and and I get really dopey, and then I get tired and I want to go to sleep. So I'm not the best drinker anyhow.
Right.
But I don't drink when I'm with her, just because why would I? It's just, I don't know. It just doesn't seem important enough to drink. I think I drank all I needed to drink between the ages of like about 15 and 25. That now my body said, something, we're going to turn you bright red and make you fall asleep after drinking 3 drinks now.
You're lucky.
No, I am very lucky. I am very lucky, because God knows I tried. I tried. Yeah. I was a poster child for this. So I did everything, tried everything, did everything to excess, and then I was done. And I don't know many people. I just don't have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just don't have that. And I come from a whole family that has it. So I just, I don't know what the difference is.
That off switch, I was just talking to a mom about that, where she was saying, my 2 older boys smoked pot, and, my daughters, it never appealed to us, but my youngest doesn't have that off switch. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't have it either. I empathize with that.
That's what it kind of feels like. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
So it's interesting that we have both sides. So, Maureen, you have the family side of, your perspective, like, I don't want to drink, or why should I drink, or why would I drink, with my daughter there because she's in recovery. And then there's our side, or at least my side, which is that, my recovery process was about making sure that I was okay living in a world where other people could enjoy something I couldn't, that they could use it socially or recreationally, and that it's actually more uncomfortable for me for people to sacrifice that enjoyment just because I'm in the room. It makes me feel like the abnormality. It makes me feel like I'm making it uncomfortable for them to enjoy something just because I'm the one that has the issue with it. And, maybe in the beginning it was really nice of my family to do what they did. And, I think in the beginning it's a great support, but ultimately, for me at least, my recovery was about more than just not using. It was about getting comfortable with the fact that other people could and I couldn't. Right?
Yeah. And you didn't feel like that right away though?
No. I was
Okay.
definitely.
So she's still in early recovery. I think
Yeah.
she's only almost 2 years, but I still consider that early recovery.
Yeah.
Yep.
And every
5
family
years
system's
of early
different.
recovery.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a number of instances like this where I kind of got pissed off with people. Like I remember the first squash match I played. Like the big thing in kind of men's league squash is you go to another club, play a match, and then they'll put out beers or dinner and beers or something. And the first time I went through one of those where I was at like a club like that where it's a big part of the environment and people were cracking beers and I was like, oh no, I'll have a seltzer. That was tough. That was tough. And I had a similar experience the first time I played a round of golf on a sunny spring afternoon where there were 3 other guys kind of drinking a beer on the first tee, getting ready to go out for a Friday round of golf, and me being like, yeah, I'm really not participating in that. Those were hard things. And I remember going out to a dinner with my teammates after a squash match once, and one of the guys offered me a beer and I snapped at him. I was just like, man, I don't drink anymore. And it really hit a nerve. But, with the benefit of time, I realized that he's a really nice guy and a good friend, and people just don't remember. They don't notice. And that's not their bad. It's, I'm the one with the issue that's abnormal. Most people who are offering you a beer after a sporting event are being social and are going to go home and not screw their life up after that beer.
Well, it's what they do, and they can't understand why you can't do it the same way. Even with coaching, like my brother, I remember the first couple of years, he's like, so when are you going to be able to have a drink? And I was like, well, I don't want to have one. And he's like, well, after a couple of years, then can't you do it normally? And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it works. And like even a few years into it, he was still coming at me, and he's like, so can you drink yet? And from his perspective, it was just that I was putting it down until I, sorted some stuff out, and then I could drink. And that's his perspective.
Yeah, I wonder if people in my life have that perspective, or like think, well, it's been almost 10 years, maybe this little phase is over.
Right.
And yeah, I don't want to rob others of their enjoyment of a situation, that's for sure. But sometimes I do get still frustrated, resentful, whatever, in social situations where it seems like there's a over predominant focus on drinking or substance use. I kind of am like, yeah, I'm good with that.
I just think maybe this is a good opportunity for a lot of people to take a look at how much they drink and how much they rely on that. Because like even you were saying, people that you feel like you can't go on a date and get to know somebody. I wonder whether you'd like them as much if you both weren't having a drink. You know what I mean? Maybe sitting down and having a cup of coffee is a better idea. I really do. I think this gave me an opportunity to step back and think, God, look at everything, good, bad, indifferent, there's alcohol involved in it. So maybe it's a good opportunity to stop that.
Well, and I mean, it's also, it would be great if people could look at that. I mean, I've gone out on quite a few dates with no alcohol, no nothing, just food and talk. And, I learn a lot quicker that I do or don't like that person.
Yeah.
if alcohol is not involved, like this is really you, and we don't have the alcohol we don't have the alcohol cloud between us. It's like, all right, so no, I get it. I just don't like you, and this is cool. Like we can move on, and there won't be a second date. We don't have to pretend and waste a bunch of money on dinner and stuff like that. It's like, I get it.
Coffee dates, the key to a happy relationship.
Just
ice cream. I like that.
Yeah,
that would work for me.
Ice cream social.
Ice cream, yeah, I like that one. And I mean, this kind of plays into, Justin, what we were talking about earlier, as far as, what long-term recovery looks like too. I know you had an opinion and a position on this. I mean, what does it look like for the person in long-term recovery, and, how do they maintain this perspective when even maybe the world around them doesn't even see it like it really is? They're confused and constantly being asked when they can drink again or smoke a little pot. That was my favorite one that came up recently. Like, so now that pot's legal, can you smoke it? And I was like, no, it's not. That doesn't change anything for me. Like, it could all be legal and all available at 7-Eleven right next to the Twinkies, and it still doesn't change my issue with that. And
I have an abuse history with that substance, a major abuse history.
Right.
And
Twinkies? Wait, the other stuff.
Yeah. It was foundational to my developing a substance use disorder, because the thing about pot in my experience was, when I was playing JV hockey as a sophomore in high school, I couldn't very well go like pound some Goldschlager and then show up to hockey practice, but I could do that with pot smoking. So it became something really constant, and I will never forget that, and kind of how that played into me just using a mind altering substance all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's very strong in my memory. But I as I've grown in my recovery and my circles have grown, I meet more and more people who say they can put down other substances and still smoke pot. Like, I just connected with a guy recently through a Facebook group I'm on, who was celebrating having put down alcohol for, I think he was celebrating 10 months. And
Wow.
I got to talking to him, and I kind of thought he might still be smoking weed. And he said that he is, and that it's been really beneficial to him. It helped him socially. He's been able to put down alcohol, which he looked at as a destructive substance for him.
Right.
But, he finds a benefit from marijuana in his telling anyways. And yeah, that's a tough one.
It's tough. I would say it's tough for me to swallow that, just because of my own version of recovery. I have a bias.
Yeah.
I look at my version, the one that was handed to me, my abstinence-based 12-step recovery experience, was that you can't go backward into that, and that it's if you're relying on one or the other, that you're not actually getting well. And that was my experience. So that's really the only thing I have to compare to. And so, it's hard to be open to the suggestion that somebody else maybe has a different version of what I had, and they're going to have a different version of recovery, and they're okay with that other version. But I chose the one that I wanted, just like they're choosing the one that they want. And it's what's okay for them. And if they ever decide they want what I have, they would have to do their recovery differently. But they're just like they say, there's many paths to recovery. There's many paths to different versions of recovery, I think, is the missing part of that statement, because there's not many paths to the same recovery I have. There's only one that gets you here, but there's many other versions of recovery, and those paths will get you there. And one version of recovery may be somebody that's smoking pot to
clean
not
with
have...
the green.
What's that?
Clean with the green.
Clean with the green, yeah. The marijuana maintenance program. It's
California sober.
Yes, there's a lot of different versions of that. Yeah, and
well, I'm not talking shit about that, because I think it's a positive step for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the first couple of years of my recovery trying to convince people or not my recovery, of my professional work in the field, trying to convince people to stop smoking weed, because everyone was still smoking weed. And I would be like, you're not sober if you're not smoking weed. And I've kind of given up that crusade in a lot of my own professional work in certain circumstances. I just think there are other things I can do to help people along the path at their pace, rather than kind of be like, this is what you must swallow right now. I can tell people, well, this is my experience and this is how I got well, which is the same as you, Mike. Abstinence-based. I mean, I didn't need anyone to tell me that sobriety didn't include smoking weed. I knew that before I knew anything about sobriety.
Right.
It's very tricky. And to tie it into like the long term, with where I'm at today, I tell people, like, I keep one AA meeting a week, a men's meeting that I really like, pretty sacred, and I can commit to that. And I cannot commit to going to 4 or 5 meetings a week like I did for the first couple of years of recovery. And sometimes I feel like people inside AA are a little quietly judgy of that. That, like, well, if you really wanted it, you would tell your daughter when she's saying stay home for dinner, nope, I have to go because my recovery comes first. And I don't want to do that. I want to be home for dinner with my young daughter. Like, that's the reason that I got sober. And yeah, kind of how that plays out long term, where I want to stay sober. I want to protect my sobriety. I want to live and grow in recovery without tying up, without trading sort of family time for recovery meetings or something like that.
Well, I mean,
am I clear or all over the place?
No. That's, I guess it's like with anything else. I mean, in the beginning, you have to go at it kind of hard and fast. You have to aggressively chase it and pursue it. You have to make sure that it is a priority because of how easy it is for it to take a back burner to life. So, maybe the first 18 months to 24 months, it's like, it's a priority. It's got to be your everything. You're creating a new way of life, right? You're learning how to live again. You're learning how to feel again. You're learning how to address your life issues and the damage that was done while you were using whatever it is that you were using. So in the beginning, hard and fast makes sense. In the beginning, making sure that is a priority over everything else is critical. But to your point, to the long term, I mean, at a certain point, I believe that you probably switch over into the maintenance phase of things, right? How do I maintain this thing that I worked so hard to get? And I can't imagine that it's chasing it the same way you chased it in the beginning. I mean, if you've adopted the new way of life and you are now practicing these skill sets in your day-to-day routine, it's more about bringing the message to the next person, staying involved in the community, being active in your community as maybe an advocate for either the recovery system that got you well or just the recovery system in general. But that's it. I mean, that's where I'm at. I don't go to meetings on a regular basis. My recovery, I think that I've adopted this new way of life as the way things are for me. And it's more about how do I keep it? Do I keep talking about it, share my experience, strength, and hope? But that's it. I see a lot of people still chasing it after 5-10 years and 20 years, chasing the meetings as though they are the recovery. And my understanding is in the 12 steps, there's actually a recovery process, not just going to meetings. And if you do that, you can get a really a good version of recovery to help you.
So
live.
if you're working that 12 step by practicing these principles in your affairs and carrying the message to those who still suffer, you're doing it.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is the point. I feel like if you're still chasing meetings, maybe 5 or 10 years into it, that you might want to go back and revisit the process. Like if chasing meetings is the only way you can stay well, maybe there's other things you can do, no matter what support system it is.
Meeting makers make it.
That's what they say. Yeah. There's a lot of things they say. They have a lot to say. But no matter what, I mean, they're
so vociferous.
What's that?
They are so vociferous.
It doesn't matter which recovery support system it is either. I mean, we're talking about the 12 steps, but whichever one you're chasing, they all have a foundation they all have a foundation they're supposed to follow, like whether it's smart recovery, get the workbook, do the program. Like,
I think SMART is a little more transparent from the jump about this. This isn't necessarily a fellowship where people should expect to go to meetings forever.
Right.
I think that's kind of baked into their initial literature. Like, they have their 4-point plan or program that they do. There's some written work involved with that, and it's good work. It's kind of CBT based, I believe, and they do have some sort of ongoing, more like reunion-y type of stuff where people come together. But I think they do say this isn't to go to 5 meetings a week for eternity type of thing.
Right. Well, I think they all have that. I mean, the idea of the fellowship and the meetings is to get people involved, get you rubbing elbows with people who are doing the right thing, ask them how to do it, have them lead you in the right direction, make friends, feel normal, get well, but not forever. Like that's where you go in the beginning. And across the board, like I said, 12-step, smart recovery, refuge recovery, like whatever peer support system you're engaged in as a part of your long-term recovery. I mean, the most important thing, in my opinion, is giving it back, helping another person. So now, Maureen, I know that we like to pose a question to all of our guests, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to present that for Justin, so that we can talk about his position and some of the things he might like to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we usually ask people is what they would do. What's that one thing that you would like to see changed in order to, maybe it's about long-term recovery, or maybe it's just about having other things happen in recovery. But what's that one thing you think you would like to see change?
The one thing I would like to see change is for insurance to pay for everything. Like, I would like insurance to pay for long-term, 2-year structured continuums of care that contain, in some cases, 6+ months of residential care. That's the one thing I would really like to see changed. And maybe a more modest goal that doesn't involve taking on the insurance lobby would be, I want to say, multidisciplinary types of peer recovery centers where, like sober coffee shops or sober places that there would be more places that offer the community of an AA or NA across different contexts for people to access sober communities, like the Phoenix, to your point.
Right.
Just lots of different avenues for people to get recovery community.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of that. Like Bob, Joe, was it Mike Farello, who runs Boston Bulldogs?
Mike, yeah, great guy.
People like that, organizations like that, just take the alcohol out of some fun things and let people. I don't know, what was it like? Maybe years ago, it was people didn't come to recovery as early as they do now. But there seems to me because it was a lot of alcohol, right? And alcohol kills you slowly. Right. Yeah. Alcohol kills you slowly. So we have more people, I think, that are young and are trying to get in recovery. And you can't be young and that be your thing for the rest of your life, your social life, while everybody else is still.
I'd love to see the wise elders of AA who are in their 50s and 60s and have a lot of time under their belt really open their minds to this, of like what young people might need might be different than what they came up with.
Yeah. I like that. I think you're right. And things change and we have to change with them because this is serious business here.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that, if we could get insurance companies to pick up the tab, that would be great. It's unlikely that they're going to pay for what is actually necessary to solve the problem. So it's up to us,
Zero chance. It's going to be all outpatient.
Maybe if we say it louder. If we say it a little bit louder.
For a variety of types of care, including long-term structured residential. Blue Cross Blue Shield, are you listening?
Maybe, but they're definitely not listening to us. Not right now. And that's, I guess that's a bigger issue, is like getting into, why is it symptom-based care instead of solution-based care? Why aren't we actually trying to help people get to the other side of this? Like, would you treat partway through cancer? Would you treat partway through an injury? Would you get them halfway through surgery and be like, you should be all right by now? It's like, the goal is to actually solve the problem, except with this particular issue. And I'm sure there's a solution to it somewhere. We probably won't come up with it in this particular podcast, but maybe on another episode. Yeah, maybe on another episode. But I definitely want to thank you for joining us and for coming on and discussing this with us, because it's important. As a person in recovery and somebody in this field, I really value your opinion, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you guys. Maureen, great to meet you and connect with you. Mike, I love you, man. Love your work, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
You too, man.
Thank God for Four Circles, rest in peace, where we met at that recovery dinner.
I know, right? I'm very grateful for that. And all those, I mean, all those connections that we make, it's great. So
yeah, we're very, very lucky to, I mean, this is work.
right.
The civilized work day.
Yes, I love it.
Talking recovery. It's a real blessing.
So I really liked that. I liked what Justin had to say about recovering out loud.
I thought that was great. It's a great topic.
Yeah, I think that this is like the key. Personally, I mean, I watched during the whole AIDS crisis. I watched people come out and start speaking about AIDS and about having AIDS and about being infected, and you remember? I don't know if you remember when Magic Johnson came out and said
I
that
do.
he had AIDS, and I mean.
I was in high school, but I remember it. Yeah.
The perception of that fear factor started to go away, a little bit, not go away. That's probably not the right way to say it, but the stigma of that, if he could get it, then, anybody could get it. And then you had other people coming out. And I think I think that's what we need now. We need more people not to be ashamed. There needs to be more, people talking about it and talking about recovery too.
Right.
Because we hear so often about the death toll and this person died and that person died, and it's awful, but we need to hear about people recovering.
Right.
Because we need to know that it's possible, and that people that are trying to get into recovery need to know it's impossible.
No, that it is possible. You said impossible. It is possible.
That it is possible. And I know it's possible because I'm watching my own personal hero, my daughter, almost 2 years. So, and she's a person that not a lot of other people thought were going to make it. And she's always been very vocal about struggling and then about recovering. And I'm so proud of her. But I think more people need to get on that bandwagon of recovering out loud.
Well, those are the stories, those are the stories that give hope. Those are the stories that parents hear, and they hear about a kid that, was loved. They hear about a kid that had opportunities. They hear about, an individual that wasn't born in the hood and was a bad kid destined to do drugs. I mean, these are kids like their kids, and they can get well. They can get to the other side of it. I know I hear that in my office all the time. They're like, "You really did all that?" I'm like, "Yes, of course I did. It was terrible, but now here I am." And
that's people like to. I think that there's this need to point at people and say, "Well, it can't happen to me because it happened to them because this is how they're different than I am." Right. And whether that's race or neighborhood or whatever, we find a reason that it can't happen to us because people are afraid. But when you start showing that it can happen to anybody, because look at it happened to you, and I actually know your mother loves you very much. So
yeah, I do too. I think. I mean, she told me.
So she told
I believe her. You got all this this shame, all this stigma, all this people don't want to talk about it. And like you were comparing it to the AIDS epidemic, and when Magic Johnson finally came out with it, maybe it didn't go away, but people were able to talk about it, like you said. And I think that recovering out loud is great. There are some people that maybe they can't because of their job, because of their family, because of their life. But, for me, it's become my life. It's become what I'm most proud of, is overcoming this thing that takes lives. It took 70,000 lives last year. And I'm proud of the fact that I was able to get to the other side of this thing. Right. And recovering out loud is a good thing. It gives people hope, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Individuals, families, everybody.
I think that's so important too, because this is not easy. It's really, really not easy on anybody.
No.
When you look at other people that have gotten through it, gives you like that small, no matter how bad things are at the moment, that there's that possibility that things can turn around.
Well, it's also like hearing about other people going through this is helpful for another reason. It's kind of like when I was a kid, right? I was in my teenage years, and let's say I was dating somebody and then they broke up with me. Oh my God, this was the worst thing in the world. Nobody can possibly imagine what I'm going through. I'm all alone in my woes, and you just don't understand. But everybody understood, and everybody had been through it previously. And I wasn't the only one that had this experience. And so, in that same vein, when we start talking about it, we start giving it a voice, and people show up at family support groups. Like I know Justin facilitates a couple in the Boston area.
Right.
I run one on Thursdays. You participate, in the Magnolia group, which is huge, and you service a lot of people. And so these these stories, these groups where people are recovering out loud, the individuals and the families, they make it so that when people feel that feeling, they go to a meeting and they realize, I'm not the only one feeling that. I'm not the only one thinking that. I'm not
So
in
important.
a silo going through this chaos in my head and in my heart. And like the arguments that mom and dad are having and brothers and sisters are having are not unique to that system. They happen everywhere.
When I get emails and text messages all the time after people read my book and they say, you just told my story. I didn't think anybody's story was as crazy as my story. And yeah, I'm reading your book and it's all the same things are in it. So we're not alone. I mean, nobody is. Whether you're the addicted person or you're the family, the stories are so similar
But I felt alone.
Of course.
Just like every parent has. I mean, as an addict, I felt alone. I felt like nobody had the same problems I did. Nobody had the same reasons that I did for having, for using. And I felt alone. And and all the people that I met who said they got well, I didn't believe them. I didn't believe it was possible. I was like,
you were somehow so special that it was not going to be you that could get well, right?
Well, even more so. It's like I had tried and failed so many times, and I was like, oh, you didn't do it. I can't do it. You didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't believe it could be done.
Right.
And, I think it was being around people who got well and watching them live that life that was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe you can. And maybe I want that. And you know what? I do want that. I'm going to do something to get that. That was my experience. But, there's definitely like the recovering out loud. And I know that, sober communities, the different things that are available to people who are trying to get well and stay well are huge. I know that we talked about like the sober bars and like
sober bars. I know no one opened up in New York. It's not long before they start opening up everywhere, hopefully.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
I was reading about that. There was like, there's like a coffee bar. And then there's also a bar that's like mostly sober. It's not even, but they just like, they serve non-alcoholic drinks and stuff like that. I mean, we like in our conversation with Justin, it was like, why is alcohol the go-to thing?
Right.
Like why is that the thing? Why is that the social lubricant? Why is that, this toxic poison that, kills more people? There's more alcohol related deaths every year than all other illegal drugs combined. But this is our social tool, as adults, like this is the go-to social lubricant. Hey, you guys want to go get some poison and, try not to throw up tomorrow and feel terrible about ourselves.
It's crazy, isn't it?
At least that's how I look at it.
Well, but it's like, I don't know. I think then there's this pressure to have a drink, because you don't want to be the odd one without a drink.
Right. Going to a party, going out on a date, being at an event, right? Watching a football game or a basketball game or whatever. I think, people in recovery feel like they can't have fun or can't do these things without it.
Well, what was really nice about your event for Barry's house? I went and I didn't have a drink, and I felt no pressure to have a drink because half the place was sober. You know what I mean? So it was like, I don't have to have a drink. But sometimes when I go someplace, it's like, all right, I'll have a glass of wine. I don't, and even whether I want one or not, I wound up, walking around with it.
Well, and at a fundraiser, we're raising money, so we want to loosen people up a little bit, and get them.
You weren't loosening me up.
We want them to get comfortable, But it's definitely there's like an expectation for it, And I almost feel like if I go out. And I mean, and not at this point because people know who I am, but in the beginning, when I would go out, there was well, why aren't you having a drink? I almost felt like I had to explain myself.
Right. That's why.
You know what I mean? Like, why do I have to explain myself? I just said no.
Drink? What's wrong?
Yeah. Like, can't you be all right with that? Like, why does something have to be wrong for me not to want to drink? Or like, why can't we come up with something else to do that doesn't revolve around alcohol and still have fun? And I found that in recovery, but it was hard, like we talked about with the Phoenix gym and the sober bars and,
Strong down on the Cape.
Well Strong.
There's a bunch of things out now. You know what I found too, have you ever heard of Meetup?
I have not. No. What is that? Okay.
So Meetup is like a social get together kind of things. You go on to meetup.com, and I'm sure there must be other ones too, but I've actually used this myself when I wanted to kayak with somebody and I didn't know anybody that kayaked. So I went on there and I found a group that was going out. It's all, for the most part, I mean, after a while, people get to know each other and all go on the same, meetup. But
Okay.
it's people that want to meet other people that like to do the things that they want to do. So I
Wow.
found kayaking meetup groups, this hiking meetup groups. But there's sober meetup groups too that go out and just do activities.
Right. Go racing go-karts, throwing axes,
I
good
know.
sober
Yeah.
fun.
I want to throw an axe really badly. So don't even get me going on that.
Well, there's a place, Apex, out in Marlboro. My kids and I went out there to take a look at it. We chose the wrong day. We chose like a school vacation Saturday afternoon to go there, and there was like
that's not good.
20,000 kids there, and everything had a 4-hour wait. But they have like the escape room, axe throwing, virtual sports,
This stuff
go-karts,
is all so
pool,
much fun.
and none of it requires alcohol. Like you could just
Right.
go there and spend the day at this place, with a group of friends and have a fantastic time. But it's not the normal. It's not what we're used to. I mean,
Right.
I've had drugs as a part of my social situation since I was 14. That means that every social interaction was, hey, are we going to go smoke? Do you want to go smoke? Do you want to drink? Do you want to get some drugs? I have drugs. Do you want drugs? You have drugs. Can I get drugs? Like everything was around that, all
Right.
of my social interactions. And so getting sober and trying to find something fun to do was weird.
Yeah.
Weird and abnormal for me.
Right. No, I think for most people.
Mhm.
And I think most people that aren't even, not even people that are in recovery or not even people that have an issue with alcohol, or they still feel odd not having a drink. And that's just something that we need to, do away with somehow, because we were talking about my daughter's wedding, and she, I don't think that she should have alcohol there if she's not drinking. It's our wedding.
I agree.
Who
I
cares
mean,
what anybody else wants? It's our
Well,
wedding.
well, that's what I'm saying. Why is it the go-to? Why do we just assume that needs to be there?
I
Right?
don't know. I
don't
don't know.
either.
It's very strange.
Maybe one of
More
our
peop-
listeners know.
I
Maybe they
think
can
more
fix
people
it.
start talking about recovery. More people start talking about this, and we'll have less of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Well, I like this conversation. I like this one already. And, being a person in recovery myself, I'm really grateful for people like Justin and, the folks that are out there trying to talk with families and take this discussion to the next level. Like you were just saying about, making this a normal conversation. Like we should be talking about something we should be comfortable talking about something that takes so many lives annually here in America. We should be able to talk about it casually. Like we should be able to talk about this normally just in our community, and maybe curbing some of the social perspectives on substance use and abuse and alcohol use and stuff like that would be a great start. And, but again, this was a great start to a really big conversation. And I'm grateful for having Justin on with us, and I'm sure he'll be on again at some point. So, all right. I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode of Collateral Damage. As always, if you'd like to find out all the different ways that you can listen to our podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.cdpodcast.com. There are many different ways to listen and subscribe, and we encourage you to choose the one that's most appropriate for you. And as always, I would encourage our listeners to get informed.
Stay connected.
Thank you for joining us.